Good morning. Making music is the ultimate team sport. And to be successful in music making is just like that in sports, working hard and playing together. Today we're going to introduce you to some instruments in the orchestra, and we're going to talk about playing on this team, a team that we call an orchestra. Before you meet the players and before you get a chance to hear the instruments, we're going to talk about some fundamentals of the game. And for today's comparison, we're going to talk about basketball and how basketball compares to making music. Throw me the ball here. Thank you. In basketball, there's offense and there's defense. In music, we have melody and harmony. In the melody is like when you have the basketball, and you're dribbling the basketball. And harmony is when you're helping your other team members. And so you're supporting the person with the basketball. And to win in the game, it's all about playing together and having fun and working as a team. In music, we work together by such things as blend, dynamics, balance, doing our attacks together, doing our releases together. We also share a lot of other things with basketball. Tempo is the same. Tempo in a game is how fast you go. Tempo in music is how fast we go. And both of us are concerned with rhythm all the time. An athlete must have great rhythm. A musician must have great rhythm. And when you practice, must be done as an individual and must be done as a team. And it's all for the sake of the team. Just like in basketball, we also warm up. You have to stretch your muscles. You have to get ready to play. And when we get ready to play in music, we do something called tuning. So let's tune up. Okay, we're ready. And so we're now going to introduce you to the first part of the team, the string family. And the violin is perhaps the best known of that string family. It's an amazing instrument. It's been in this present form for about 400 years. It has about 70 pieces of wood, all held together with glue only. No screws, no nails. And the sound is made by drawing the bow across the strings. And it also has its own built-in amplifier. And to show you what I mean about the amplifier, I'm going to have Brenda hit a tuning fork and hold it on the bridge of her instrument so you can hear how it has its own built-in amplifier. Good. Thank you. Now, let's get to the violin. Joni, tell me about some of the parts of the violin, would you please?
Here we have the back of the violin and the front of the violin. Really, the violin is a piece of art. The violin makers spend many, many hours to make it as beautiful as they can and sounding as good as they can. We call this the belly. These are the F holes. This is the bridge where you saw Brenda put the tuning fork on. We have a scroll. These are the strings. 400 years ago, they made these strings out of actual guts. But now they use man-made materials and metal. And we use the bow to draw across the strings. And this here is horsehair. And what they do, they give the horses a haircut from their tails. They don't hurt them at all. They just give them a haircut. And we like to use horses in cold climates because it's thicker hair. So usually like Siberia or Mongolia. That's the hair we like. Okay?
Okay, terrific. Now could you show us a little bit about how the violin sounds? Could you give us an example of some versatility? You see, the violin is an instrument that can play all kinds of styles.
Here's some Mozart.
Now, can I play any other styles?
Sure. Country western, fiddle music?
Sure. To tell you a little more about the violin and the string family, just like in a choir, there's a soprano, which is the highest voice, there's an alto, which is kind of a middle voice, a tenor, which is a little lower, and the bass, which is the lowest. Every family, including the string family, also have a soprano, alto, tenor, bass. The violin is the soprano. But now let's meet the alto. So let me take you back to the violas. Now, Karen, tell me what's different about the violin and the viola.
Okay, the viola is designed and constructed just like the violin, but the major difference is that it's bigger, and so it produces a lower sound. The whole instrument is wider, the ribs are deeper, and the instrument, the body of the instrument from the bottom here to the top is usually about 2 inches longer than the violin. Now, it's not so obvious by itself, but if I hold it up next to a violin, you can really see the difference. And I'll hold it up next to Chelsea's instrument here, and you can see that that indeed is a larger instrument.
Yeah, that certainly is. Now, can you give us an example of how the viola sounds?
Yes, first let me demonstrate. This is the lowest note on the violin. It's a G. And then I play a few notes lower than that. And the overall sound of the instrument is a little bit more subdued and what I would call plaintive.
That's beautiful. Now let's try something a little different here too. Let's show you how the various families and their ranges, so you can see the higher voices and the lower voices. So Joni, let's start the scale and work around to Jenny and to Karen, then Brenda and Ty. Now the next instrument of the string family is the cello. And the cello is really a big violin, but it's better off that Brenda tells you about it. Brenda, tell us something about the cello we don't know.
I'd love to. You can see that the cello looks very much like the instruments you've already met. The biggest difference, of course, is how big it is, and the fact that it doesn't have a chin rest because you cannot put it under your chin, and it has an end pin. And the end pin slips right inside the instrument because the instrument is hollow, the way all of our instruments are. And then when you're ready to play, you take the end pin out and you tighten it and you're ready to go. Otherwise, the cello is very similar in every other respect.
Could you give us an example of what it sounds like?
Sure. The cello is known for a singing tone, and it's very much often thought to be the instrument that's closest to the human voice.
Let's now go to the bass member of the string family, the bass viol. Ty, could you tell us a little bit about the bass?
Sure, John. This is the biggest string instrument. It needs to be big to make the big boomy sounds you hear sometimes on TV or movies. It has really long, thick, heavy strings. And there's other different accommodations the bass needs because of its size. One is that you see that we have gears up here, and that's to help us tighten the strings. Because they're so big, we need a little mechanical help. Another difference is that we play with the bow and hold it a little bit differently. This is called a German bow. There's other types of bows, but this is the kind I like. And we grip it just like you'd shake someone's hand. and that's because you have to press down so hard on these big heavy strings.
Okay, could you play us an example and let us hear it?
Sure.
Now, one of the things that's most interesting to me about a bass is that it's used in all types of music as well. Oftentimes in jazz or Dixieland, or could you give us an example of something there?
John, a lot of times in jazz, the bass is played like this. It's called pizzicato. You pluck it with your hand.
Terrific. Now we're going to let you hear the string family together. And we're going to give you an excerpt. Most of the day we're going to do excerpts, actually. That means little short snippets of what we're going to play rather than the whole piece. We're going to start by a piece, Ein kleine Nacht. Here we go. Okay, now we're going to show you melody and harmony. Strings, could you go to measure 5? No first violin. Now you're going to get to hear the harmony without the melody. It's missing something, isn't it? Now let's add the melody. Now let's listen to another example, another piece of music that you can hear the melody. Let's do the air. Bach air from Suite Number 3. Now I hope you could hear the melody still in the first violin and the other harmony parts. We're now going to introduce you to another part of the team, the woodwind section. And to start with, we're going to introduce you to the flute, the highest pitch or the soprano of the woodwind section. The flute's been around for a long time. Ancient Egyptians and Romans and Greeks played flutes, a little different looking than they are now. But we're going to take you back and have Linda tell you how the sound of the flute is produced. So how do you make the sound in the flute?
Well, being a woodwind instrument means that I blow into the flute. And the flute has a mouthpiece here, and there's a small hole, and I blow a fast, thin stream of air against this sharp edge. And then the air that goes into the flute vibrates, and the tube makes the sound louder so that you can hear it.
Wonderful. Kind of like blowing across a bottle, a Coke bottle, or a 2-liter bottle.
That's right. Yes.
Okay. Now, could you play us an example of what flutes sound like? Now let's let you meet another part of the woodwind family. We're now going to introduce you to the oboe. The oboe is a rather old instrument also, been around for hundreds of years, and it's different than the flute in that it's made, the sound is originally produced by the two reeds. It is a double reed instrument. There are two pieces of cane that when you blow across them, it causes the column of air to go into the instrument. And it changes the pitch just like it does with the flute by opening and closing keys or fingers over the holes. Aaron, could you give us an example of what the oboe sounds like? Terrific, thank you. Now, we're going to play an example of using strings and oboe so you can hear it together. But also, the reason I'm doing this is I want to make a comparison between basketball here as well. In basketball, you pass the ball. In music, we sometimes pass the melody to each other as well, and different parts have it. So we're going to play a piece by a composer named Handel. And so here we go. And now let's introduce you to a single reed instrument. The oboe is a double reed instrument. The clarinet is a single reed instrument. One cane reed hooked to a mouthpiece through a ligature that air is blown across and vibrates. And then the column of air, its pitch is changed by opening and closing the holes in the keys. So Russell, could you give us an example of how the clarinet sounds? And now let's introduce you to the bass voice, or one of the lowest instruments of the woodwind section, the bassoon. Now the bassoon plays an integral role also in the orchestra and gives a little different color to the sound. The bassoon is also like the oboe, a double reed instrument, but a lot lower pitch. Jennifer, could you give us an example of the bassoon? Thank you. And now let's listen to the woodwind family play a piece together. We're going to play a little example from the Haydn Divertimento, number 1, and the St. Anthony Chorale, and then a variation. A variation means the theme and the melody have been altered on the new version. So here we go, woodwinds. Now the variation. Now, if you notice, the French horn, a brass instrument played with the woodwinds, and that's quite common in a woodwind ensemble to add a French horn. And we're going to talk about the French horn in a few minutes. Now let's go on to the brass section, another part of the orchestra family, and certainly another part of our team. So far, we've talked about the soprano part of each section. But let's change it a little bit, just for variety, and let's talk about the lowest pitched instrument of the brass family, the tuba. Mike, tell us something about the tuba.
Well, the tuba is the largest instrument in the brass family and provides two roles. One, mainly is the role of the tuba is the foundation of the entire brass section, providing the lowest notes. But often, actually not often enough, it actually produces a wonderful sound as a solo instrument.
Rightly so. The tuba makes for a great solo instrument, but oftentimes they hear it as an accompanying instrument as well. Could you give us an example of a soloistic passage and then give us an example of an accompaniment passage?
Sure.
Okay, now a accompaniment passage. Great. Tell us about the valves here, because all the brass instruments have valves, with the exception of trombone, unless it's a valve trombone. But tell us about the valves and what do they do?
Well, the valves on a brass instrument are very similar to, as you would see a violinist put down her fingers on different places on the strings, or a clarinetist or flutist put down different keys. They actually change the pitch of the instrument.
How do they change the pitch of the instrument?
Well, they actually lengthen the entire instrument. The tuba, if it was rolled out, is actually 16 feet long, wrapped up. So every time you add a valve, it actually increases the length of the horn, therefore making the horn longer and making the pitch actually go lower.
Okay. Well, let's go to another instrument in the brass section. Let's go to the trombone. Joey, tell us something about the trombone.
Well, trombone is similar to the tuba because it is the low brass instrument, and often they're teamed together. But the trombone is unique in the fact that it has a slide instead of valves, and it can drive your parents crazy all afternoon by doing this. Etc., etc., etc. for hours.
You can get a lot of mileage out of that, can't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, give us an example of a classical sound, but also the trombone's used a lot in jazz. So give us both examples if you could.
Okay, I'll give you a classical one first. This is Mozart from Mozart's Requiem. That's how it opens. And then for a jazzier example, we'll do When the Saints Go Marching In.
Would you like me to join you on this, Joe?
Please, as your accompaniment roll, that would be wonderful.
Terrific, guys. Thanks. And now let's go up to the French horn section and talk a little bit about the French horn. Now, I didn't tell you much about the history of the trombone and the tuba. The trombone actually has been around for many centuries under different names, and the French horn has also that long history. The French horn goes back to an instrument used for signaling, for hunting. It also was found in the early Roman armies, even made of metal, to be used as a way to communicate back and forth. But the French horn as we know it now, and not exactly with the valves, but the French horn as it's been used in the orchestra has been in the orchestra since about 1700. So now I'm going to ask Carolyn, if she would, to tell us something about the French horn. Carolyn?
The French horn is the roundest of the brass instruments. It also has keys to help you play the right notes. When you push the key while you're playing, the note will change. You can also change the note by stuffing your hand all the way into the bell.
Now, is that why you put your hand in the bell?
That's one of the reasons. One of the other reasons is to hold the instrument, because you can't hold it with one hand. It gets very heavy.
Okay. Does it also, it produces all different sounds then when you have your hand in the bell. Could you do that again for us? Now let's go to the soprano instrument of the brass family. We're going to go to the trumpet. The trumpet has been used in ceremonial occasions, in military circumstances for centuries. Also very much a classical instrument. Also, you've heard it in jazz and in rock. A very versatile instrument. Chris, could you tell us a little bit about the trumpet?
Well, the trumpet is the highest part of the brass family, and it starts with the B-flat trumpet, which is also the instrument used in band and orchestra. And then we have several trumpets going to the very highest member of our family, which is the baby trumpet, the piccolo trumpet. And it's half the length of this trumpet, which is 8 feet long, all stretched out. And so we can cover different styles and different types of music by going to different trumpets when they're needed.
Great. Can you play an example of trumpet for us? Now, the trumpet is used not only in classical circles, as I mentioned, but it's used a lot in jazz. How about a jazz example?
A 1, 2, 3.
Now we're going to play an example for you with strings and the trumpets, but the piccolo trumpets. This is an excerpt from Vivaldi's Concerto for 2 Trumpets. And now an example using the piccolo trumpets with both Chris and Teresa. This is also another way for you to listen to how the melody gets passed back and forth. And in classical music, the strong beats and the weak beats. Typically 1 and 3 are strong beats. And you'll hear that. Just like in bouncing a basketball. When you bounce a basketball, it's down on 1, it's back up on 2, down on 3, back up on 4. And it's that same concept. But now let's listen to a little excerpt from Vivaldi's Concerto for 2 Trumpets. And now we're going to listen to an example of the brass family playing a selection together. Murray's Rondo. And now we're going to introduce you to members of the percussion family. They have a whole array of instruments from which to choose. Doug, could you take us on a tour of some percussion instruments?
I sure will, John. All this stuff you see back here is percussion. And, well, honestly, there's just too much of it to talk about all of it, but I think, if it's okay with you, we'll play a little bit.
Sure.
All right, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4.
And now we're going to invite some friends up to join us on a piece using percussion and strings. The piece is entitled The Toy Symphony, and it was originally thought to be written by Franz Joseph Haydn, but later on they determined that actually it was written by Mozart's father, Leopold. The Toy Symphony. Guys, could you join us? Now, right before the game, the basketball players are all wearing the same thing, aren't they? They have uniforms. And sometimes when you go to a classical music concert, you must think that the orchestra is in a uniform, because we kind of have the same clothes on. Well, we do. We do have a uniform that's usually used for most classical concerts. And so if I could, let's ask the orchestra to go change into their uniform so we can play a couple of selections for them. Okay, we're in our uniforms and we're ready to make some music for you. The first piece we're going to play for you is by a French composer named Pyrenees. And why we've selected this is because it's just like in basketball when a player goes to the foul line and shoots a shot all by themselves with everyone else standing still. Well, in music we call that a solo. And in this selection there is a solo. It starts first of all with trumpet, but then it goes to flute. Now next we're going to play an example to show you how the various parts of the orchestra work together. So we're going to listen to the string section, and then the brass and percussion, and then the woodwinds, and then we're going to play the piece all together. Strings, here we go. Good. And now the brass and percussion sections. Good. And now let's hear the woodwind section. Now, as you could tell, the melody was predominantly in the woodwind and also the first violin, but you had all kinds of accompanying going on. So you know to listen for the melody, and you also know to listen for the harmony. So now we're going to play an excerpt of this piece and let you hear them all together. And next we'd like to play a piece for you by a composer named Rossini. What we want you to listen for in this piece is the volume. We call them dynamics. You'll hear very loud playing, you'll hear very soft playing. Very soft playing, we use a term called pianissimo. Soft, we call it piano. Medium soft, we call mezzo piano. And medium loud, mezzo forte. When it's loud, we call it forte, and really loud, it's fortissimo for us. So as you do this, I want you to listen to the various types and levels of volume. Here we go, players. And at the beginning, we're going to play a little part at the beginning. And for you teachers there, this is in 3. It's a great time to discuss triple meter. And now, the last part of this piece, and listen very closely for the dynamics, and you tell us when you think it's loud and when it's soft. thank you very much for being with us today, and we hope that you've enjoyed it half as much as we have. We'd like to finish by playing a piece by John Philip Sousa, a very famous march, Stars and Stripes Forever. But the one message we'd like to leave with you today is that music is fun, and that music is inclusive, not exclusive. And we hope that you, those in the audience, and those of you studying music, will continue to do so and continue to make it a lifelong either avocation or vocation.